Legends of the Black Siren, Hunt for the Caribbean Treasure. The blazing Caribbean sun shimmered on the endless blue horizon as the research vessel Marlin sliced through the waves. Ethan Carter stood at the bow, gripping the worn leather-bound journal of his late grandfather, the man who had spent a lifetime chasing legends of the lost pirate ship Black Siren. Ethan had grown up on stories of Calico Vance, the ruthless pirate captain who supposedly vanished with a treasure beyond imagination. Most believed it was a myth, but Ethan knew better. After months of combing through ancient records and forgotten maps, he finally had coordinates, and now, after a lifetime of dreaming, he was on the verge of unearthing history. With him was a trusted crew. Izzy Ramirez, the fiery ship captain who could navigate the most treacherous waters with her eyes closed. Malik Bazara, a sonar and marine technology expert who could read ocean currents like a book. And Baptiste Duval, a veteran diver from Haiti whose knowledge of underwater salvage was unmatched. They had sailed together before, faced danger together, but none of their previous adventures compared to the ominous pull of this voyage. By midday, Malik's sonar pinged a massive metallic anomaly resting at the ocean floor, far deeper than usual wrecks. Suspense gripped them as they deployed Nautilus, their remote underwater drone. The live feed showed a decaying wooden hull with iron cannons partially buried in the silt, the infamous siren figurehead still visible through centuries of marine growth. They had found it, the Black Siren. The first dive revealed a haunting sight, rotting timbers, collapsed masts, and skeletons still clad in remnants of pirate garb. Yet among the ruin was a fortune. Chests of gold doubloons, silver goblets, and jewel-studded relics. Ethan's heart pounded, but he knew there was more. His grandfather's journal spoke of a hidden vault beneath the Siren's keel, the heart of the Siren, where the most coveted treasure lay concealed. As the divers surfaced, Izzy's voice crackled over the radio. 3 high-speed boats were approaching fast from the east, modern pirates, well-armed and closing distance rapidly. Ethan didn't hesitate. They had to escape, but the Marlin was a heavy ship built for research, not for speed. With Izzy at the helm, they maneuvered toward a jagged reef system known among smugglers as the Devil's Teeth. It was suicide to enter, but they had no choice. Bullets peppered the water as the pirates chased them into the reef maze. Baptiste rigged explosives on narrow channels, detonating them just as the enemy boats advanced, causing massive plumes of water and debris to capsize 2 of their pursuers. The third boat lingered outside the reef, waiting for them to emerge. Knowing time was limited, Ethan led a second dive straight to the wreck's lower hull. With controlled charges, Baptiste blew open the old wooden barriers, revealing the hidden compartment. Inside sat a massive iron chest, sealed with the emblem of a siren. They attached lift bags and dragged it toward the surface. Back on board, the chest was heavier than expected and seemed to radiate a strange vibration. Malik's instruments picked up an unknown energy signature emanating from it. When they cracked open the ancient iron lid, they didn't find piles of coins or jewels. Resting in the center was a polished obsidian sphere, dark as night, pulsing faintly. Surrounding it were minor artifacts, gold coins and ceremonial daggers, but the sphere was undeniably the centerpiece. Ethan reached out but paused as the sphere emitted a low hum, causing the lights on the Marlin to flicker. Malik's readings became erratic. The sphere was drawing energy from their ship. Ethan's gut twisted. This was no ordinary treasure. This was something ancient, perhaps older than the Black Siren itself. As they debated what to do, the remaining pirate boat closed in again, its intentions clear. Ethan made a decision. They would use the cursed artifact as bait. They loaded the iron chest back into a decoy crate, rigged it with explosives and a pressure-sensitive detonator. When the pirates forced them to hand over the chest, they waited just long enough for the enemy to get out of range before detonating it. The explosion ripped through the sea, but as the pirate boat disintegrated, the sphere released a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to shake the seafloor. Moments later, the sea itself roared back in fury. Malik's sonar detected shifting tectonic plates, rising geothermal activity, and massive underwater tremors. They hadn't just destroyed the pirate boat, they had awakened something old and vengeful. The ocean writhed around them as a violent storm materialized out of nowhere. The winds howled like banshees, Waves towered over the Marlin, and eerie siren-like singing echoed from beneath the depths. Instruments failed one by one. Malik shouted over the chaos that the sphere had triggered a feedback loop, and unless they released the relic back to the sea, they would join the Black Siren at the bottom of the ocean. Fighting through howling winds and crashing waves, they dumped the remaining artifacts, then hoisted the obsidian sphere overboard. As it plunged into the abyss, the winds began to subside, and the waters slowly calmed. The singing stopped, and the Marlin steadied itself. The crew stood in stunned silence, breathless and exhausted. They had stared into the maw of the sea's fury and survived, but the cost was sobering. Baptiste looked down at the few salvaged coins and artifacts that hadn't been cursed and cracked a tired grin. "Next time, we just take the gold that doesn't hum." Malik, still pale from the experience, simply muttered, "We were never meant to find that thing." Ethan remained quiet, watching the sea reclaim what was rightfully hers. They had set out to hunt treasure, but found a nightmare instead. The journal remained locked in his cabin, a reminder that some legends were warnings, not invitations. As the Marlin sailed away from the cursed depths, Ethan realized the true treasure wasn't in gold or relics, but in surviving the wrath of the sea and living to tell the tale. Somewhere beneath those endless waves, the heart of the siren slumbered once more, and he intended to leave it undisturbed forever. But deep in the ocean's shadows, something ancient stirred, its hunger not yet satisfied. Several days had passed since the Marlin had left the cursed waters behind. The skies were clearer, the sea calmer, but the crew remained uneasy. Nights were restless, filled with strange dreams, and the distant echo of siren songs seemed to drift on the wind. Ethan sat alone in his cabin, his fingers tracing the aged leather cover of his grandfather's journal. Most of the maps and notes had led them to death and danger, but one page kept gnawing at his mind, a passage that spoke not just of the Black Siren, but of other ships, other hidden relics scattered across the Caribbean. Izzy knocked lightly before stepping in, holding 2 mugs of hot coffee. "Still reading?" she asked softly. Ethan took the cup with a faint smile. "I can't shake the feeling it's not over, Izzy." Izzy leaned against the doorway. "We could head back to the States, sell what little we salvaged, and be done with it. Start fresh." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You saw what happened. That sphere, it didn't just react to us, it connected to something ancient, something alive. My grandfather was chasing more than just pirate treasure. He was chasing the remnants of something much older." On deck, Malik was recalibrating the sonar systems, restoring the equipment damaged by the sphere's final pulse. Baptiste stood nearby, securing the remaining chests of gold. Though they were safe, the whole crew could feel it in their bones. The sea hadn't finished with them yet. As the Marlin approached the port of Nassau, Izzy throttled down the engines, her expression cautious. The harbor was unusually quiet. Boats were anchored, but there was an unsettling absence of fishermen and dockhands. Malik double-checked the radio frequencies, but they were filled with static. Baptiste loaded his rifle, his instincts kicking in. "Something's wrong here," he muttered. The Marlin eased toward the dock. Ropes were tied, but not a soul greeted them. Then Malik intercepted a faint distress transmission on a backup frequency. Multiple vessels along the outer islands had vanished over the last 72 hours, and bizarre energy readings were being detected near remote reefs, places where nothing should exist. Ethan's knuckles whitened. He flipped open the journal again. There, circled in his grandfather's penmanship, was a simple phrase: "The siren's heart is only one key. Others remain hidden, bound to the sea's oldest powers." Izzy stood by his side. "You think this thing was part of something larger?" Ethan nodded grimly. "We didn't end the curse. We woke it." Malik displayed new sonar readings from the approaching area, unexpected metallic anomalies along the seafloor, deeper than modern wrecks, emitting the same harmonic signals they'd recorded from the siren sphere. Worse, strange whirlpools and freak weather events had been reported from those coordinates, areas that had been calm just weeks ago. Baptiste cocked his rifle, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. "Looks like we're not going home after all." Ethan closed the journal, standing tall against the salt-stained breeze. "We started this journey chasing gold. Now we're chasing answers. Something ancient is rising beneath these waters, and we're the only ones who know." Izzy fired up the Marlin's engines once more, turning them away from the quiet port and back toward open sea. Malik plotted a new course toward the coordinates marked decades ago, but long dismissed as myth. Baptiste stood at the prow, watching for dangers only the depths could deliver. The Marlin surged forward, leaving behind the safety of civilization, heading straight into uncharted waters. The crew knew they were no longer treasure hunters. They had become guardians of secrets the world had forgotten. Whatever waited for them out there in the heart of the Caribbean, they would face it together. And somewhere, beneath miles of crushing black water, something stirred, older than pirates, older than humanity, listening and waiting. The Marlin pressed eastward, its steel hull groaning against the pull of deep ocean currents. Every mile away from Nassau seemed to peel back layers of time, pulling the crew deeper into the forgotten chapters of history. The coordinates Ethan followed led them beyond familiar trade routes, into uncharted waters, mapped only by whispers and cryptic notes. The first signs came quietly, strange fluctuations in the sonar, water temperatures rising and falling in impossible patterns, bioluminescent fish swirling beneath the hull in dense, chaotic schools. Malik analyzed the signals again and again, each time concluding the same thing. The sea was behaving unnaturally. By the third day, the weather shifted dramatically. Not a storm, worse. The sky dimmed under thick clouds despite the morning hour, and the wind no longer came from a single direction, but swirled around them like a restless force. Izzy cursed under her breath as she fought the wheel, muscles tight from exhaustion. Baptiste stood armed at the stern, staring into the gloom, muttering old island prayers his grandmother had taught him. Then came the discovery. Beneath their keel, sonar painted the outline of something massive, half buried in sediment, a sprawling ruin, neither a shipwreck nor natural formation. Malik deciphered the architecture through the sonar pulses, colossal stone arches, carved spires, remnants of structures built centuries before any known civilization sailed these waters. "It's not pirate history," Malik whispered, his voice dry. "It's something older." Ethan stared at the sonar image. His grandfather's last scribbled notes hinted at ancient sea cults, pre-Columbian sailors, even lost civilizations erased from history. But to see physical proof rising from the abyss unsettled even his hardened soul. They dropped anchor above the formation and suited up. The water was too deep for free diving, so they prepped the ROV, sending Nautilus II into the darkness below. Cameras pierced the inky void, revealing black stone pillars carved with twisted figures, half woman, half serpent, mouths open in silent song. The current howled around the structure, and for a moment the crew swore they heard a faint hum through the ship's hull. Then they found it. Another obsidian sphere, identical in shape to the first but fused into the ruins, glowing faintly beneath the layers of silt and coral. Energy readings pulsed erratically, and the sea around the sphere bubbled unnaturally. Ethan's stomach turned. They had destroyed the Siren's heart, but they had only broken one link in a much longer chain. The water trembled. Without warning, the currents below accelerated, forming a vortex around the structure. Malik's monitors flashed red, pressure shifts, tectonic instability, something moving beneath the ruins. On deck, the Marlin rocked violently, anchors straining. Izzy barked orders, ready to cut the lines and run. Baptiste stood his ground, rifle trained at the waves as if the sea itself would rise up. Through the ROV feed, they saw it. A colossal stone door, previously buried, now cracking open as though awakened by their intrusion. Something ancient moved behind it, something vast and alive, coiled in the blackness of the ocean trench. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. They hadn't just stumbled onto a forgotten civilization. They had uncovered a sleeping giant, a force lost to legend, whose guardians had failed and whose chains had started to break. The sea roared louder. The Marlin trembled harder. "Reel it in," Ethan shouted. "We're leaving, now!" But Malik's instrument screamed in alarm. "It's too late," he said. "It's already awake." As the first tendrils of the abyss stirred, glowing faintly beneath the storm-churned water, Ethan realized they weren't just explorers anymore. They had become witnesses to an ancient reckoning, and there would be no turning back. The Marlin groaned as Izzy fought to keep it steady, but the ocean writhed beneath them like a living creature. The sonar screens were filled with impossible readings, massive moving shapes, electromagnetic pulses and deep rumbles echoing from the trench. Malik's hands flew across the controls, frantically trying to stabilize the ROV, but the cables strained violently. From the depths, the dark water swirled upward in thick spirals, carrying with it fragments of ancient stone and bones so old they seemed almost fossilized. Ethan stood frozen, clutching the railing, watching the surface bulge and churn. Baptiste loaded another clip into his rifle, though they all knew bullets were meaningless against what was awakening. "Cut the cable!" Izzy shouted. "We need to move, now!" Malik's hand hovered over the emergency release, but before he could act, the video feed cut out. For a second, everything went silent. Then the Marlin shuddered violently as a shock wave surged up from beneath, rattling the steel hull and nearly throwing them off their feet. From the water erupted a towering column of foam and spray, and within it they glimpsed something. Shadows twisting inside the surge, enormous scales that shimmered unnaturally, a shape that defied human comprehension. The waterline surged upward as if the sea floor itself had risen to meet them. Ethan forced himself to move. "Cut the line, Malik! Get us out of here!" The ROV line snapped before Malik could reach it, torn apart by the force from below. Izzy slammed the throttle forward, engines screaming as the Marlin surged away from the ruins. Waves chased them, unnatural and hungry, trying to pull them back to the abyss. Behind them, a low, bone-rattling hum rippled through the air, the same frequency they had first heard from the Siren's heart, but magnified 1,000 times over. Lights on the Marlin flickered, the compass spun wildly, and Malik's monitors displayed only static. Ethan looked out at the horizon but saw nothing, only the endless gray of storm clouds rolling toward them. Baptiste gritted his teeth. "This ain't just a curse. This is a goddamn force of nature." Izzy pushed the engines to their limit, guiding the Marlin through building swells. The further they got from the site, the less the water fought them, but the humming never stopped. Even when they reached calmer waters, the sound lingered, faint but constant. That evening, under an eerily red sky, the crew gathered in the galley. Malik spread out old maps and data logs, tracing the pattern of similar readings across the Caribbean. Ethan paced nearby, heart pounding as realization settled in. "These spheres, they're spread across the sea," Malik said. "Ancient nodes, locks maybe, containing something. We broke one, we woke up another." Baptiste jabbed a finger on one of the maps. "Look at this, reports of vanished ships, whirlpools swallowing whole vessels. They're always near these markers." Izzy leaned in, voice low and serious. "If we don't stop this, the sea will eat everything. Not just us. Islands, ports, it'll all disappear." Ethan's jaw clenched. "We need to finish what we started." Malik's hand hovered over the maps. "You want to find the rest of them?" Ethan nodded. "Not to take, but to seal. We need to find these relics, understand them, and put whatever we've unleashed back to sleep before it's too late." Izzy slammed her fist into her palm. "Then we sail at first light." Baptiste grabbed his weapon, rechecking his gear. "Looks like we ain't retiring anytime soon." Outside, the sea had grown deceptively quiet, but beneath it, ancient powers stirred restlessly. The Marlin's mission had changed. They were no longer hunters of gold. They had become guardians against the forgotten nightmares of the deep. As the crew made preparations, Ethan looked at the journal resting on the table, his grandfather's final notes, the words no one had dared believe. "The sea remembers, and it reclaims what is disturbed." This was no longer just a treasure hunt. This was a race against time and against something older than mankind, and the ocean was watching. The Marlin sailed eastward into the open ocean, following the ancient path Ethan's grandfather had outlined decades ago. As the sun rose over the Caribbean, a tense determination settled over the crew. They weren't chasing riches anymore. They were chasing answers, racing to prevent something ancient and powerful from breaking free entirely. Each day the sea grew stranger. Flocks of seabirds circled endlessly overhead, their cries distant and confused. The water temperature fluctuated violently, cold currents clashing with streams of unnatural warmth. Malik's sonar revealed constant distortions, shadows that didn't belong, faint tremors along the seafloor. It felt as if the ocean itself had turned restless, watching them with unseen eyes. By the 5th day, they reached the first site marked in the journal, a series of jagged, uncharted cays surrounded by razor-sharp reefs. The sonar pinged off strange formations beneath the surface, curved structures, partially buried, forming a perfect spiral on the seafloor. Ethan's heart beat faster. The journal had called it the Spiral Tomb. They sent down Nautilus 3, the newly repaired ROV, fitted with extra shielding and reinforced cables. The live feed revealed towering coral-covered obelisks, some leaning at precarious angles, others standing tall and imposing. At the center of the spiral, they saw it, a half-exposed obsidian sphere resting within a carved stone pedestal, identical to the one they had seen in the Siren's chamber. Before they could proceed, Malik's console lit up with warnings, rapidly rising pressure, energy spikes, and faint harmonic signals matching those from the previous site. Ethan made the call. This time, we don't disturb it, we bury it. Baptiste rigged a containment rig from their spare equipment, reinforced with lead plating and seismic dampeners. The plan was simple. Use controlled charges to collapse the surrounding sediment and rock, sealing the sphere deep beneath the seafloor, cutting it off from the open water. As they prepared, Izzy kept the Marlin steady, her eyes constantly checking the horizon. Something's moving out there, she warned. We're not alone. Through binoculars, they saw it. A vessel, old and rusted but still operational, flying no flag. Through Malik's directional microphones, they heard the faint pulse of the Siren's hum emanating from its hull. Pirates weren't the only ones after these relics. There were others, people who knew of these ancient powers and wanted to claim them. Ethan's voice was sharp. We move fast, in and out. Dives were made swiftly under cover of night. Baptiste and Malik secured the containment net over the sphere, working quickly despite the oppressive weight of the deep water pressing around them. The hum grew louder, the water more violent, but they pressed on. Then the enemy ship made its move. Powerful spotlights beamed down on the Marlin, and within minutes armed men boarded. Izzy and Ethan met them on deck, pretending to negotiate, buying precious minutes. Meanwhile, Malik triggered the detonators. The ocean rumbled as tons of rock and sediment collapsed over the spiral tomb, silencing the hum. The enemy vessel's crew suddenly turned frantic, realizing too late had happened. With coordinated precision, Izzy kicked the engines into full throttle, and Baptiste, from a hidden position, launched smoke grenades to cover their escape. By sunrise, the Marlin was miles away, the hostile ship left stranded amidst swirling waters, robbed of their prize. Exhausted but victorious, the crew gathered in the operations room. Malik's readings showed seismic activity around the site falling to baseline levels. One relic sealed, one lock restored, but the battle was far from over. Ethan laid out the map. There are 3 more. 3 remaining spheres marked in the journal. 3 more places where the sea is stirring. Izzy cracked a tired grin. I guess we keep going. Baptiste nodded firmly. We finish this. Malik adjusted his instruments, calibrating for deeper waters. Let's hope we're not too late. As the Marlin turned toward the next distant horizon, the crew understood the magnitude of their mission. This wasn't just about stopping ancient forces. It was about restoring balance to the oceans themselves. The deeper they ventured, the more Ethan realized how little humanity understood of the world beneath the waves. Far below, in unseen trenches, colossal shadows stirred, momentarily subdued but not defeated. And the sea waited, ready to test them again. The Marlin pressed onward, forging deeper into the forgotten corners of the Caribbean, where no modern maps dared to mark safe passage. Each mile sailed was a journey not just across the ocean, but into humanity's lost past, into the realm of ancient power, sealed away beneath time and tide. The next coordinates led them to the Midnight Pass, a treacherous channel between 2 isolated islets where currents churned like angry serpents. Ships avoided this corridor, and now Ethan understood why. Malik's sonar showed violent distortions, submerged rock towers, unpredictable whirlpools, and beneath it all, another anomaly, pulsing with a low frequency that seemed to vibrate through their bones. The second relic, another sphere, another lock waiting to be restored. The weather worsened as they approached. Skies blackened despite the hour, waves rising higher than any storm Izzy had ever sailed through. She gritted her teeth, steering the Marlin between swirling vortexes, navigating by instinct when her instruments blinked and faltered under the magnetic interference of the relic below. Ethan studied his grandfather's weathered notes, realizing these sites weren't placed by accident. The spheres weren't merely scattered, They were positioned at natural choke points, controlling the ocean's heartbeat. When disturbed, these locations became the source of destructive force, destabilizing the delicate balance between land and sea. This time, Baptiste and Malik agreed. The only way to neutralize the relic was to entomb it permanently under the seabed. But the conditions made diving impossible. The solution was dangerous but necessary. They would use depth charges to trigger controlled landslides from the nearby seabed ridges, collapsing tons of rock and silt onto the sphere, cutting it off from open waters. Working through howling winds and tilting decks, the crew deployed the charges. Every second stretched unbearably long. Ethan could feel the thrum of the relic grow angrier, as if it sensed their intention. The waters heaved, pressure spiked, and Malik's monitors lit up with red alerts. A swirling column of water shot skyward from the heart of the channel, glowing faintly blue, and for a moment the ocean howled with the voice of something that should have remained asleep. Then Malik pressed the trigger. A thunderous boom split the sea. The shockwave rolled outward, toppling rock towers beneath, dragging massive walls of sediment down into the channel's core. The column of water collapsed in on itself, and the pulse that had hammered their bones suddenly vanished. The sea, furious moments ago, grew eerily still. Izzy wiped the sweat from her brow, steering the Marlin away from collapsing reefs. Malik confirmed it, readings returning to normal, seismic stability restored. Baptiste exhaled a long breath, slumping against the railing. 2 relics sealed. 2 sites restored. But as the Marlin sailed away, Ethan's eyes fell on the remaining 2 markers on the map. The last 2 sites weren't near any island. They were in open ocean trenches, far from any hope of refuge. And on the horizon behind them, dark shapes lingered. Other ships, other forces, watching, following. Those who would stop at nothing to claim these relics, no matter the cost. Ethan knew the worst was still ahead. The final spheres were deeper, more powerful, and more dangerous. The ancient sea was awakening, and this time it would fight back. The sea stretched endlessly before them, a vast blanket of shifting gray beneath iron skies. Days bled into nights without much distinction, and the crew of the Marlin felt the weight of their mission pressing heavier with each nautical mile. The 2 relics they had sealed had quieted parts of the ocean, but other regions had grown more volatile. Izzy charted the course with grim determination, knowing they were headed to a place no modern ship dared sail, the Devil's Mouth Trench. It was a stretch of abyssal blackness, one of the deepest gashes in the Caribbean seafloor, a place whispered of by old sailors but carefully omitted from charts. Malik's sonar began to fail even before they reached the perimeter. Strange static and electromagnetic pulses corrupted all their instruments. Baptiste said little, though his eyes watched the water constantly, hand never straying far from his sidearm, even though he knew it was meaningless against what lay beneath. Ethan spent long hours poring over his grandfather's notes. The final entries spoke of ancient keepers, of powers hidden by the first mariners, of civilizations swallowed whole by the sea when they strayed too close to the abyss. The last sphere wasn't just a lock, it was the oldest, buried deeper than any other, meant never to be disturbed. The Marlin arrived at the trench under a sky thick with thunderheads. Malik launched Nautilus 4, their last drone, modified for extreme depths. The cameras descended into darkness, revealing monstrous vertical cliffs of black basalt, crusted with strange corals and ancient carvings, symbols older than any known culture, depicting serpentine figures intertwined with human forms. Hours passed as the drone navigated narrow canyons, diving deeper than it was ever designed to go. Finally, it found it. Resting within a massive underwater grotto was the final obsidian sphere, wedged within the ruins of a cyclopean altar, ringed with skeletal remains too large to belong to any human. Ethan whispered to himself, "This is where it began." But they weren't alone. Malik's proximity sensors lit up. Another vessel had arrived, a sleek black warship bearing no flag, bristling with advanced weaponry. Through the binoculars, they saw figures on deck, armed men in tactical gear and strange cloaked individuals who seemed to chant, their voices faintly audible even over the sea. "They followed us here," Izzy muttered, her knuckles whitening on the wheel. Baptiste's face was grim. "And they don't want to seal it. They want to unleash it." Ethan felt fury boiling inside. They had come too far to fail. We seal it now, whatever it takes. In a rush, they prepped the final plan. Nautilus 4 carried their last seismic charge, enough to collapse the entire grotto and trap the relic under an avalanche of rock. Izzy maneuvered the Marlin into a narrow cut between ridges while Baptiste readied smoke grenades and defensive weapons. Mullick controlled the drone, guiding it through the trench's tightest passageways. As the Marlin's engines roared, the enemy warship closed in, opening fire. Explosions rocked the sea surface. Baptiste returned fire, keeping them distracted while Malik pushed the drone forward, deeper and deeper, the pressure nearing crushing levels. Below, the sea trembled. The chanting from the enemy ship grew louder, and the sphere began to pulse violently. The sonar displayed something massive shifting within the trench, something ancient responding to the relic's awakening. "Now!" Ethan shouted. Malik triggered the detonator. A delayed, monstrous rumble echoed through the deep. Entire sections of the trench walls collapsed inward, crushing the altar, silencing the sphere's pulse. The sea above exploded in a massive surge, capsizing the warship as geysers of superheated water burst from below. The Marlin was flung like a toy, but Izzy's quick hands on the throttle steered them out of the collapsing currents. The chanting stopped. The hostile ship vanished beneath the waves. Then, silence. The sonar stabilized. The humming stopped. The ocean calmed. Ethan stood on deck, battered, soaked, but breathing. Baptiste lowered his rifle, Malik fell back into his seat, and Izzy let the wheel go slack for the first time in days. 4 relics sealed, 4 locks restored. The sea, though vast and untamed, had quieted once more. Ethan looked out over the endless blue. It's done. But Malik, watching the sonar, muttered, "For now." Because beneath them, miles below in the eternal darkness, the ocean still stirred. And it would never forget. Weeks later, the Marlin docked at a quiet harbor, battered but victorious. The crew moved silently, each carrying the weight of what they'd faced and what they'd barely escaped. The treasures recovered were modest, the real prize the knowledge they now guarded, secrets better left buried beneath waves and time. Ethan sat alone on the dock, the journal open in his lap. He traced the faded ink lines, reflecting on the journey, the lost pirate ships, the obsidian spheres, the ancient powers that had almost consumed them all. He knew this was not the end. Somewhere out there, other relics, other mysteries awaited discovery. The ocean's depths still held countless secrets, and not all were benevolent. As dusk fell, a shadow detached itself from the gathering darkness. A figure approached, clad in weathered sea gear, eyes sharp and unreadable. They spoke quietly but with authority. "You've stirred forces that should have remained undisturbed," the stranger said. "There are others watching now, others who seek those relics for their own ends." Ethan closed the journal, meeting the stranger's gaze. "Then we'll find them first." Behind them, the sea whispered softly, as if listening. The horizon held the promise and the threat of another voyage.